What's up, guys? This is Jay, and I just wanted to show you a quick cash game lineup breakdown to kind of give you an idea of how I construct my roster and delve into the thought process that goes into it. We've had a lot of people ask us lately if their process is correct and if they're doing things right. Obviously, this fluctuates from day to day and slate by slate, but there are definitely a few things that you can do to tighten your process up. Before Fantasy Labs, I would spend entirely way too much time researching and gathering as much information as possible, kind of finding myself rushing myself before lineups lock, just worrying about so much information that you have to find from so many different sources. So the biggest thing with Fantasy Labs that I love is, we have the models and the projections and trends, not to mention the constant news updates. So really, it cuts your time off so much. And my time has been cut off to where I can do other really important things in the day, like watch reruns of The Sopranos or play Mario Kart on the Nintendo 64, things like that. And then even then, I still have enough time to make my rosters, which is awesome. So I'll start things off with DraftKings real quick. These lineups were from the Monday, November 30th slate, which consisted of 8 games. And this lineup was pretty chalky overall. My lowest owned players being surprisingly Blake, and then not surprisingly Raymond Felton. I mainly do a bunch of head-to-head and double ups, but this particular slate, a lot of those double ups filled early. So I ended up just joining a bunch of 20-person 50-50. So these percentages aren't as accurate in the larger field double ups, but it's what we got to work with. And yeah, that's quite a bit of chalk that I ate on this slate, really. So I'll kind of start with basic roster composition that I ended up with. You'll see I used 3 point guards. Obviously, one in the point guard slot. You can't really escape that one. One in the guard slot and one in the utility as well. So I generally like having a point guard, especially in the guard spot and also the utility. If I don't go 2 centers, which has offered quite a bit of value this season so far. And my rationale in that is that I want as many players as possible who have as many opportunities as possible to accumulate points, which obviously is usually point guards since they handle the ball often. I kind of built my team around Durant and Blake, the 2 most expensive guys on this roster. I was really happy to be able to squeeze Millsap in there, who one of my favorite cash game players because he has an incredibly high floor, which I just can't stress how important that is for cash. I absolutely love guys with a high floor for cash because you're not trying to win to get first out of 20 in these 50-50s. You're trying to just cash. So guys with high floor are very valuable. And the high total for Millsap obviously played a pretty large role in that. My value plays, I had obviously Bayless was a super chalky play, and then either Green or Mayo. They both ended up similar. They were exact same price. Really, either one would have worked. And then Clint Capula, value play, and then a somewhat under-owned, somewhat risky play in Raymond Felton, who was really cheap. And then I had Darren, who fit the guard spot perfectly, and he's been playing really well lately. And I liked his floor in this high total game. So let me go to the model real quick for this particular slate and kind of show you how I was led to these picks. One thing you absolutely have to do is stay on top of every piece of news information that comes out throughout the day. Obviously, it's quite a tedious task, but it's just so necessary. And then, we provide all of the updates from our Twitter account, so you don't really have to worry about hunting all this stuff down on your own like you kind of used to have to. So it's really great to be able to just have it all in one place and kind of know that we're not missing anything. And we've been on top of pretty much everything. It's actually, I think, one of the most impressive parts about the site right now for NBA. So obviously, the model changes often throughout the day. So you should continually be checking it and kind of making sure you're up to date on all of the information. As you can see, for point guard, I rostered three of the top four rated point guards. For rows, I generally don't target players against the Spurs, even though if you are, it's probably going to be at point guard. It's probably the weakest defensive individual matchup. But he was fairly easy to write off on this slate, just with that low total and difficult all-around matchup. I did really like Reggie Jackson, but he was more of a tournament play for me, as well as I like Curry and Teague a lot too, but more so for tournaments. Foy was minimum price, but he just has not done anything this entire season, and obviously has a very low floor, especially with his role in that offense. So I ended up with Darren and Felton more so due to JJ Barea being ruled out, which I think opened up a lot of kind of secure minutes for these two. And then the Mavs implied point total being at 106 played a large role in that as well. So shooting guard, I was definitely high on Harden on this slate, but he was playing the second leg of a back-to-back that ended up going into overtime. So he wasn't necessarily like a must play. And, you only have to go one shooting guard on DraftKings. So I definitely liked going value with either Mayo or Green. I was pretty set, kind of on playing one of them. So if I did play Harden, it would be in the guard spot. This decision between Mayo and Green was pretty tough, actually. I ended up going Green, who I thought would have a little bit more safety in terms of minutes than Mayo, given the team composition. But really, I would have been fine with either at the same price. For small forward, on this 8-game slate, I think Durant was like an absolute lock for me. That I thought the drop-off was pretty huge, in my opinion, and there were enough value plays around the slate to kind of easily afford him at a very underpriced 9,900. So this was something I really didn't put much time into for small forward on DraftKings. I think Durant was in every single lineup that I kind of considered. Before I move on with power forward, I kind of want to talk to you about like where I'm at in the part of the day that this is kind of happening in. I've obviously already had like 7 Mountain Dews at this time, which makes lineup making process significantly better. It's really when your brain starts excelling and things seem a bit easier. But in this point of the day, really kind of going through, most of these picks, kind of jotting down the guys that I'm strongly considering, and kind of piecing your team together while doing this. I usually do this kind of with a few hours until lineups lock, maybe 1.5, 2.5, something like that, to where I give myself enough time to have a set lineup that has enough updated news information, news-wise, injury-wise, and then I also give myself enough time to where I can make changes barring any further news updates or to kind of tweak the existing lineup. So I think that's really important to give yourself enough time on both sides to where you're not making them too early to where you have to change everything, or too late to where you're freaking out if any late news comes out, you won't have enough time to react. So I think you want to give yourself time to adjust to late scratches or guys who are 50-50 to play maybe, as well as time to just maybe alter your lineup to something more optimal. Let's break down power forward. So I used the top-rated player who I felt has been under-owned all season and just provides such a consistent floor. So I love going Millsap here. I like Draymond, but he didn't really have an ideal matchup or anything, and that the total of that game was a lot lower than Millsap. So at the same price, I thought it was a pretty easy decision to make for cash, at least. For tournament, you could argue Draymond over Millsap, same price. But cash, I think that's one you kind of don't really want to overthink too much there. I know they're very, very, very close, but go with the guy who has a better game flow, and that's Millsap here. So I loved Aldridge in this game. Obviously, more of a tourney play because I really like the individual matchup for him. Actually, I was just obviously worried about the guaranteed minutes, which is kind of a red flag in cash if you come across a guy who you're not really you don't really know how many minutes he's going to go. That's something you can kind of be like, okay, he might hit value or exceed value, but do I really want to go him if he kind of plays 18 minutes again? So that's something I just kind of wrote in like I'd rather go a safer option than Aldridge. Dirk was kind of the main guy I decided to fade. Like no one on Dallas was resting. I mean, Barea was, but that doesn't really affect Dirk. So his price was definitely friendly, and this was certainly a friendly game. I just really kind of wanted two guys who had large floors and then also had tons of upside. So Dirk was certainly not a bad play at all. If you ended up with him, he's very highly owned. But at the same time, he's been a guy who's been fairly inconsistent this season with not only points but kind of minutes as well. So I think exploring other options, and obviously I made lineups with Dirk in and whatnot. He's still a great play. I just decided to go with Millsap, and then for my second forward spot, I like the power forward depth much more than small forward depth and upside. So especially after Durant, so I decided to choose a power forward in my forward spot, and that was kind of between Dirk or paying up for Blake. And Blake was a player I was really targeting on this slate due to obviously a great matchup with Portland, who really has had no one to kind of stop him or slow him down. So he was a fairly easy play, I think, for me on this slate. It's a pretty cheap price for Blake at 9,100, so I kind of set him in earlier in the day, and then just eventually didn't really have a better spot, a better team that was without Blake. So I kind of wrote him in there pretty early, and he ended up making the final cut. Let's look at center, and center was very simple for me. It's something I tried not to overthink at all. And when this situation arises next time, it just, I mean, Capella has been playing really well next to Dwight, and he's been outperforming his price easily. At that price, he's just an easy play to make. It's something you don't really want to overcomplicate. So, it's something, just go Capella in this spot for cash at 5,100. He was our top rated center. So it's kind of an easy play to make. Going back to the lineup, you can kind of see that this was a pretty easy lineup to make using the model. So I definitely took a risk on Felton, but I thought the absence of Barea kind of provided him with a sufficient floor along with his dirt cheap price. He was only 3,200, so that allowed me to get all these other guys like Durant, Millsap, and Blake, and I really like the overall mold of this team. Obviously, I had Darren and Felton in my guard and utility, and then Blake in my forward to allow me for more options if late swap was necessary, which it ultimately wasn't on this particular slate. But yeah, overall, the fan model really crushed it for me, breaking down each position. This lineup was a top 25% score on the night, so definitely successful. And let's move on to FanDuel real quick. As you can see, I had a pretty good amount of overlay from site to site, which definitely happens sometimes. There's some pretty clear-cut industry value plays and top studs at each position. An 8-game slate isn't huge or anything, so it's not uncommon to kind of have overlap. But it's something that I don't think you want to just automatically do. You still have to kind of factor in price for these guys. So I ended up with 6 of the same players on FanDuel as I did with DraftKings, which is probably a good amount more than I usually do. So let's go back to the model. I'll kind of walk you through my process for FanDuel. So I decided to go cheap at point guard with Bayless and Felton again. Bayless was really just a chalk play throughout the industry, and one that was pretty much completely set on both my lineups as his minutes upside and his matchup were just too good to pass up on. So Felton was again a really good bargain on FanDuel, and I really wanted to capitalize on Brea's absence with this high total, fast-paced game. So I threw him in on there as well, which I wasn't in love with, but it allowed me to kind of spend on other positions. So Rondo was the big guy on this slate. I think he was like 50% owned on this slate on FanDuel, which I don't blame at all. He was 8,300, and that's definitely good value on FanDuel. But I really wanted to get other studs in there, and Rondo had his full team back, and I thought he was kind of due to regress a little in terms of production. And this is obviously not to say he was the wrong play at all. This is hindsight, so I didn't enjoy fading him or anything. I wasn't comfortable with it. It wasn't like it was an easy decision, but I feel like point guard kind of offered decent value, and I just kind of wanted to spend elsewhere. So for shooting guard, I really wanted to get Harden in on at least one site. I know he was on the back-to-back, but you have to start two shooting guards on FanDuel, and I didn't really want to completely fade Harden overall on this day. So it was kind of easy for me to go him here. It came down to I would rather play Felton than Green or Mayo, because Felton at least has the ball in his hands when he is in. So I felt like his kind of upside was a little bit higher than rolling both of these guys. And obviously I like Harden a good amount more than Rondo. So a lot of people on this slate doubled up on Green and Mayo as shooting guard, which certainly wasn't a bad strategy at all, but one that I didn't really love because I really wanted Harden. And as far as Green and Mayo, just like DraftKings, I chose Green, but really I think either one would have been fine. Your rationale behind playing either one. So small forward, Durant was just he was just a must for me on both sides given this slate. The high total, his recent games of him just scoring so effortlessly and looking incredible were pretty much enough to throw me in both lineups without really thinking too much. He was a guy I kind of, just put in there and left him there when building your lineup. So the second small forward spot on this slate, and I've had nights like this before where small forward is just kind of brutal. If there aren't really any cheap guys that pop up or anything. So I didn't really like anyone at this spot for the second small forward. And this is a big reason why I ended up going two power forwards on DraftKings. But I ended up going with Gallinari actually as my second small forward. He was kind of a guy, he's not the best value, but I thought he had a pretty relatively low floor. If you look at the other floors with these small forwards, only Middleton's was higher among those similarly priced. And as far as them two, obviously Middleton's quite a bit cheaper, but Gallo is relied upon more to score with his team situation than Middleton is with his team situation. Middleton, there are a lot of guys around him that can be aggressive and take shots away, whereas Gallo is kind of that guy the Nuggets rely on to put up a bunch of shots. He's a higher usage rate, and he gave me a safe enough floor that I was fine with kind of overpaying for him. It ended up being a blowout, which obviously negatively affected Middleton too, but it's not like a pick that I was in love with. He was kind of that guy that I ended up with. And on a slate like this, it was kind of hard to get away from that. I don't think I would have liked anyone as my second small forward. Maybe Kawhi, but I wasn't really trying to pay up for him in that game or anything. So he wasn't cheap or anything. So I ended up going Gallo just because, I didn't love any of these small forwards. And in this situation, he's not the worst play when he has a pretty solid floor, really. So power forward, Blake, number one value here. And he was a guy I really wanted on both sides. I just love this matchup, and he's underpriced here at 9,100. So I was pretty stubborn on keeping him in, and didn't really consider too many options on FanDuel with him out of the lineup. And the second power forward spot was pretty tough here too. I ended up rolling with Solinger actually, and rather than Dirk. So some might think like um, that matchup is horrible with Whiteside down low, but I don't really mind it at all with Solinger because he creates mismatches. He's capable of spreading the floor. If you watch the game, one really cool thing that happened was like the 6-minute mark in the fourth quarter. Whiteside was matched up with Solinger kind of near the perimeter, and Brad Stevens during the play like waved to Solinger and told him to get to the 3-point line, behind the 3-point line. Solinger's like, okay, sure. Knowing, obviously, well, Stevens knowing that Whiteside's not going to hunt him down 24 feet out from the basket. So he immediately received a pass from Isaiah and just hit a wide open 24-footer. Like, pretty incredible for Stevens to do that. But the point is, Solinger's going to get his looks regardless of his individual matchup. He has the ability to knock down those 13-footers, those 16-footers, where traditional centers can't really guard him there too often. And then, the guy who is on him is obviously going to be a mismatch. So for solely playing him, I'm usually much more concerned with his minutes than matchup. So regardless, I thought 6,100 for Solinger was really good value on this slate. Center again, same thing. I mean, it was just really, really easy to put Capella in at center at just 4,600. So, I mean, this is something you just don't really want to overthink. I rolled Capella because his extended role and steady production. So 4,600 compared to 5,100 on DraftKings too. So it's kind of like, I mean, that's a big rating difference to where it's like, okay, what am I getting in dropping in rating by paying a lot for a center and having to maybe fade Durant or Harden or Blake, and Capella is perfectly suitable of easily breaking value. So that's a play, that he's the highest rated center on this slate. And like, I like Drummond and Cousins obviously, but they kind of just played more into tournament roles overall. Like Capella is very high owned, and that's not to say you just go him because he's chalk, but there was a good reason why he was chalk for cash. His price allowed me to get Durant and Blake and then Harden on FanDuel, which I thought was plenty worth it. So let's go back to the FanDuel lineup. Again, this was a pretty easy lineup to make with the model as well. So going Gallo wasn't easy. It wasn't something that I loved, but small forward is usually not really ever bursting with value or anything. So that's kind of a position I've over the years kind of been able to kind of take a hit at in terms of this guy's not the best value, but I at least know he's going to play all game. He's going to take his shots. He's a big part of their team. He kind of has to do something. He'll kind of fall into 22.3 points. So overall, I wasn't too bummed about going Gallo, but absolutely that was the hardest part of the lineup and something that I'm pretty sure he was fairly low owned. So overall, these two lineups were very successful in cash games. Definitely top lineups that made it simple to cash by using the model and kind of not really overthinking too many things. And I rolled Felton on both sites, and that's something I don't generally do. I rolled Johnny O'Brien in cash, so it's not like I'm scared of rolling Felton in that matchup with Barea out. So he was going to get his minutes. He was definitely, I think, the player who kind of came through the most for me. I mean, I did not expect him to kind of go for 26.5. So that was pretty huge. And then the Dirk and Rondo fade on both sites also kind of played in my favor. So, a little bit of luck, but the process was sound, and that's really what matters long term for cash games. So just keep in mind, that it's so important to stay updated with each piece of news information throughout the day. The news on this night didn't really alter anything too significantly, but at other nights you'll definitely be needed to react and process each piece of information. in a timely manner, and then make the correct decision based on what is affected. So that's something that over time you kind of develop a skill for, but it's absolutely important to any form of success that you'll have with the NBA. So obviously, there were some busts, like there usually are, but as long as the process was there, that chalk that up to kind of just variance, which is really common in NBA. It happens. There are tons of variables. So don't get like discouraged that you played Bayless and you got 13 and you're really bummed about that pick. I mean, it was a great pick and one that was pretty easy on both sides to make. So don't get too caught up in the results is kind of what I'm saying. Um, Gallo, if I looking back on this lineup, it's kind of like, okay, Gallo at 7,100 is not the best, obviously, value wise. His price is a little too high. So there are things you can kind of do looking back in your lineup and kind of tweaking in your mind and being like, okay, what could I have done to kind of improve the process? And don't be super results oriented. Obviously, if you're losing like every night, then yeah, you might want to change stuff. But if you're getting bad breaks, but you think you're doing really good in process, then you might just be running bad. Like it happens. I've been doing this for a long time, and there are times where you can just be on fire with your picks and you just run bad. You can run into injuries, foul troubles, players not hitting down open shots. So it happens. Don't get discouraged. Just keep making the right decisions, and you'll absolutely be a profitable player long term. So hopefully this cash game breakdown helps you guys with your process a little bit. And I'm planning on uploading another one next week for cash games, and then also I think an interesting video would be a tournament breakdown. If you guys are interested, I could put one up later this week for you to kind of go into how I deal with multiple lineups and exposure and certain tournaments, depending on size and buy-in. I could do different ones each week. So hit me up on Twitter. It's at DoppelSykes if you guys have any questions or would like to see anything different with these videos. So good luck tonight with your cash games, and I'll have another video for you guys soon. Peace out, guys.